When the waters receded, they found their home and school destroyed. Their furniture, carpets, books, clothes, and the audio system. The school building was caked in thick, foul-smelling mud. They had nowhere to sleep and no clean clothes to change into. Luckily, a neighbor called Mr. Amandine took them in for the night. It took them a week to clear the debris. They were both away when 10 days later there was a second flood and the building again filled with mud. Shortly afterwards, they had a visit from an official of WAPDA, the Water and Power Company, who claimed their meter was rigged and demanded a bribe. When my father refused, a bill arrived with a large fine. There was no way they could pay this, so he asked one of his political friends to use his influence. It started to feel as though the school was not meant to be. But my father would not give up on his dreams so easily. I was born on 12th July 1997. My mother was helped by a neighbor who had delivered babies before. My father was in the school waiting, and when he heard the news, he came running. My mother was worried about telling him he had a daughter, not a son. But he says he looked into my eyes and was delighted. Malala was a lucky girl, says Hidayatullah. When she was born, our luck changed. But not immediately. On Pakistan's 50th anniversary on 14th August 1997, there were parades and commemorations throughout the country. However, my father and his friends said there was nothing to celebrate. Swat had only suffered since it had merged with Pakistan. They wore black armbands to protest, saying these celebrations were for nothing and were arrested. They had to pay a fine they could not afford. A few months after I was born, the 3 rooms above the school became vacant and we all moved together. The walls were concrete and there was running water, so it was an improvement on our muddy shack. But we were still very cramped as we were sharing it with Hidayatullah and we almost always had guests. That first school was a mixed primary school and very small. By the time I was born, it had 5 or 6 teachers and around 100 pupils paying 100 rupees a month. My father was teacher, accountant, and principal. He also swept the floors, whitewashed the walls, and cleaned the bathrooms. He used to climb up electricity poles to hang banners advertising the school, even though he was so afraid of heights that when he got to the top of the ladder, his feet shook. If the motor of the water pump stopped working, he would go down the well to repair it himself. When I saw him disappear down there, I would cry, thinking he wouldn't come back. After paying the rent and salaries, there was little money left for food. We drank green tea, as we could not afford milk for regular tea. But after a while, the school started to break even, and my father began to plan a second school, which he wanted to call the Malala Education Academy. I had the run of the school as my playground. My father tells me, even before I could talk, I would toddle into classes and talk as if I was a teacher. Some of the female teachers, like Miss Ulfat, would pick me up and put me in their laps as if I was their pet, or even take me home with them for a while. When I was 3 or 4, I was placed in classes for much older children. I used to sit and wonder, listening to everything they were being taught. Sometimes I would mimic the teachers. You could say I grew up in a school. As my father found with Naeem, it is not easy to mix business and friendship. Eventually, Hidayatullah left to start his own school and they divided the students, each taking 2 of the 4 years. They did not tell their pupils as they wanted people to think the school was expanding and had 2 buildings. Though Hidayatullah and my father were not speaking at that time, Hidayatullah missed me so much, he used to come by to visit me. It was while he was visiting one afternoon in September 2001 when there was a great commotion and other people started arriving. They said there had been a big attack on a building in New York. 2 planes had flown into it. I was only 4 and too young to understand. Even for the adults, it was hard to imagine. The biggest buildings in Swat are the hospital and a hotel, which are 2 or 3 stories. It seemed very far away. I had no idea what New York and America were. The school was my world, and my world was the school. We did not realize then that 9/11 would change our world too, and would one day bring war into our valley. 4. The village.